is it mandatory to submit in the DMF the FEI and DUNS numbers of the manufacturer?
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. According to SAHQ 7, the CGMP requirement starts from the introduction of the regulatory study material. So the manufacturing process of the critical intermediate should be covered by CGMP per SAHQ 7, and therefore is under the scope of the FDA evaluation. And you need to provide the fee number and the DUNS number for the critical intermediate side. And I also want to emphasize that this also includes the intermediate described in the secondary DMF. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Wei Liu. Does the last day of inspection and quality contact need to be included in section S.2.1, or is it enough to list that information in Form 356H of the referencing application?
If you have those information available, you are very welcome and recommended to include those information in the section 2.1 in the DMF. This will help us to facilitate our assessment process.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question. What are some recommended analytical methods to test to determine if an API demonstrates polymorphisms?
Thank you for that question. We have several methods which can be used to test the drug substance polymorphism. And in actual DMF assessment process, the most common we see is XRD test. And in addition to that, some DMF holder can choose the IR test or DSC test if that's suitable to the different polymorphs of the drug substance.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question. Should the hold time of drug substance intermediates be included in the DMF/NDA, and if yes, will it be in the description of the drug substance manufacturing process?
If you have any intermediate which involved in the site transfer during the manufacturing process, you may put the hold time study in the section 2.4 for the intermediates. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question. Should the primary DMF list the facilities included in the secondary DMF? If so, where should we list them? What if I don't know the facility information in the secondary DMF?
If a secondary DMF is referenced in your primary DMF, you are expected to list the secondary DMF number and its facility information in section 2.1 of your primary DMF. If those information, the facility information for the secondary DMF is not available to you, you may only provide the DMF number or the DMF number of the secondary DMF. And at the same time, you should be able to provide the LOA for the secondary DMF. So the LOA you provided for the secondary DMF makes the secondary DMF as a part of the application assessment. So we can look at the information in the secondary DMF and make the facility evaluation accordingly if necessary. On the other hand, if the facility information in the secondary DMF is available to you, you are highly recommended to list those information in section 2.1 of your DMF to facilitate the assessment process. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a few more questions for Dr. Wei Liu. Per ICH, impurity amounts below 1.0% should be reported to 2 decimal places. How about specifications? Should specification limits be 2 decimal places as well? For example, does a limit of not more than 0.5% need to be 0.50%?
The answer is yes. The ICH recommend the impurity levels below 1.0% be reported to 2 decimal places. So you need to so your proposed limit below 1.0 should be 0.50% instead of 0.5%.
Thank you for responding to that question. Got one more question for Dr. Wei Liu. On slide 18, what further control is recommended for impurity 5?
Impurity 5 in that case study is a degradation impurity. So as I mentioned in the presentation, degradation impurity should be monitored and controlled in the drug substance release and stability specifications because its level may going up during the storage. So for the impurity 5 in that case study, you need to control in the drug substance release and the stability specification at the ICH qualification threshold, so which is 0.13% in this case. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question in the next section of questions will be directed to Dr. Larisa Wu. And the first question is, what is the status of KSA for BLAs at this time? And is the KASA drug substance risk assessment you explained applicable to a drug substance derived from natural sources?
Thank you for that question. That is an excellent one. So in terms of the status of CASA for BLAs, I can tell you that in OPQ, we already have established a working group that is working to design algorithms for BLAs in terms of capturing the thought process that is used for assessment of BLAs, starting with the manufacturing process and the unit operations in those manufacturing processes. And we hope to be able to have a prototype fairly soon and then implement CASA for BLAs in the CDER IT platform by 2024. For the second part of that question, the prototype that I talked about and the CASA for drug substance that will be applicable in the DMF division in ONDP, that particular interface is actually applicable to small molecules only. I guess reviewers could use the CASA interface that we have at this moment for review of peptides and oligonucleotides, but we admit that that will need additional enhancements to the interface in order to integrate with other databases that we have available and to make it appropriate for review of this type of complex drug substances. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question, Will industry have access to CASA in the future? If not, is there any commercial equivalent or even close version of this program?
Another great question. So at this time, as I mentioned, CASA is still in development in OPQ. And even after implementation of the interfaces that I told you about, we continue to enhance and to improve the system. So at least at this moment, we're not ready to share the interface, the algorithms for the risk assessment with the industry just yet. However, as I mentioned, the knowledge-aided assessment, or the KA part of the CASA project, is only our internal project. We're also working in collaboration with those participating in the revision of M4Q guideline, as well as the PQCMC initiatives in CASA. And our intention down the road is, of course, to develop standards for structured application, or the SA part of CASA project, that would be aligned with our internal assessment and the CASA risk algorithms. So I would say that for now, I guess in the next 2 or 3 years, you don't need to change anything in the way you construct your application. Just make sure that you are submitting complete information regarding risk identification and risk controls and mitigation strategies in your application, so we can use that information when we perform our CASA assessment. But of course, like I mentioned, that this might change 3-4 years down the road as we make progress in the structured application and we come up with new guidelines. So at that time, you may need to make changes to the application that you submit to the FDA. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question: how does CASA influence future DMF submission and review? What would be the implementation timelines?
Yes, happy to answer that question. So as you have heard, we recently made significant progress in terms of implementing CASA for review of generic drug products, generic ANDA manufacturing review, as well as biopharmaceutics review, when we placed those interfaces in the CDER IT platform on February 1st of this year. And for CASA for drug substance, I mentioned we already have a prototype in place that we developed and we are currently testing. And I don't think I mentioned during my presentation, but I would like to acknowledge all those who worked on developing and testing this prototype. This was really a concerted effort from CASA for drug substance OPQ working group, as well as all the drug substance reviewers who contributed to the development and testing of the prototype internally. And the plan is that in the next few months, we will start having conversations with the IT group in FDA to place this prototype into the CDER IT platform. And then hopefully early next year, we will have a functional interface for CASA for drug substance to be used for DMF reviews. And we hope at that time we'll take full advantage of the knowledge management, the life cycle management, and all the analytics that I told you about that would inform our decision making when reviewing the DMF. So beginning of 2022 is our expected implementation date for CASA for drug substance.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question: will the CASA way of submitting be instead of ECTD submission or as well as ECTD?
Good question again. Yeah, I think our revision of ECTD efforts are still incipient. Just to give you a quick update of where we are, We actually submitted our proposal for revising the ICH M4Q guideline in November 2019. And after it was discussed internally in FDA, we then submitted to ICH in February 2020. And this topic received endorsement from the ICH Assembly in May 2022. So since then, we actually had a lot of discussions internally, and we formed a working group that worked on a draft project concept paper. And that concept paper was then sent to the ICH Assembly in October 2020. We received some comments, we addressed the comments, and I'm happy to report that as of Tuesday, actually, we were given the green light to proceed with this effort at ICH level. So we hope to start official discussions about revisions of ECTD format in June this year. And we have an anticipated timeline to complete the revisions in the next 3-4 years. So I guess for the next 3-4 years, you don't need to make any changes again in the way you submit data to FDA. But later on, we want to make sure that whatever we include in a revised ECTD guideline, as well as in our guidances coming out from the PQCMC project that we have ongoing that is dealing with standardized data elements, CMC data elements and terminologies, all those will be aligned with our internal CASA interface that we use for assessment. So stay tuned. You will find out more about what do we need you to submit to FDA in the next 3-4 years, like I said. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have just a few more questions for Dr. Larisa Wu. The next question is, can CASA be applicable to post-approval change assessments?
Yes, good question again. So as I mentioned during my presentation, we do have a 5-year plan to expand CASA to other dosage forms. So right now, CASA that we developed is applicable to solid oral dosage form, but we plan to expand that to liquids, generics next year. And then also we plan to expand to different type of applications, right? And definitely supplements is one type of application that we plan to have CASA for, as well as INDs and new drug API, and of course BLA, which I already touched upon.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question, when should we expect the revision of M4Q?
Again, I think I already touched upon the timelines of M4Q guideline revision in one of my previous answers. So as I mentioned, we're going to start discussions with ICH in June of 2021, and we have an anticipated timeline to complete the revisions in the next 3-4 years. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Larisa Wu. Any thoughts on the timing for updates to M4Q and industry subsequently having to submit in template format? Will this be in addition to the existing application requirements, or is it a replacement?
Again, I think this question in a way is a repeat of what we've heard coming from the audience in the previous questions. As I mentioned, we will come up with a revised version of the ICH M4Q guideline, and we hope that the requirements for content and organization of your submission will be in line with CASA. to ensure that the KA, or the knowledge aided assessment portion of the CASA project, is done efficiently in FDA, and we achieve higher, like I said, higher efficiency of our review, and also knowledge management down the road. And I think the one thing that the industry will see relatively fast upon implementation of CASA is an increase in consistency in our evaluation as well as in communication with them.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next set of questions will go to Dr. David Skanchy. And here's the first question. What are the benefits of CASA for the completeness assessment review?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history on CASA for completeness assessment. Because completeness assessment had that structured checklist that you see in the guidance, it was very amenable to get that into the CASA interface early on. And so we decided to do that as our first step into CASA. And so we implemented that back in April of last year. So we've had just a little less than a year of experience with it, and have probably done over 300 completeness assessments now in the CASA system. And if you look at the poster by Yingzi Wang and Jayani Pereira, they present some data that was mined from the CASA system on those completeness assessments. And this is data that we have been providing to industry about completeness assessments for several years now, but we always had to mine that data the hard way. And using CASA, we were able to get that data much easier. So, take a look at that poster in the context that we were able to get that data in a fraction of the time that it used to take us. So the impact is we can report out and mine data much more easily and present that out to industry in a much easier and complete fashion.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Dr. Skanchy. Is it required to mention facilities used for characterization of API impurities and one-time studies in 3.2.S.2.1?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because that's the section in the ECTD format that reviewers go to find the complete rundown of all the facilities that are supporting the master file, we recommend that you do list those facilities. And we do recommend that if they are not manufacturing or routine testing facilities, that you very clearly specify that the facility was just for a one-time characterization study. We do not expect that those types of facilities would be reported to the applicant for inclusion in the application and on their 356H form. But for us to have that clarity in a place in the DMF where we expect that information to be, it makes it very convenient for the reviewer. And when we see that, we know when we're doing a TCIR that, oh yeah, that facility is a one-time NMR study for the structure. That's why it's not in the application. That makes perfect sense. That's not a hidden facility, and it's very clear to us. So it is very helpful, so we do recommend it.
Thank you for responding to that question, and we've run out of time for questions. Thank you to our panel for answering all of the questions that came in.